stars are in light that we felt we would know.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 9th episode of Discover Hospitality, a series where we discover hidden jobs and careers in the hospitality industry and share career advice for students, graduates, and those of us with a few years of experience, and anyone who's interested in the hospitality industry. I'm your host, Maria Malaniia, a hospitality graduate, guest experience, and hospitality brand specialist, and a founder of Savvy Hotelier, a place for hospitality students to ask questions and find resources for their studies and beyond. Discover Hospitality series dives into many areas of the industry, such as events, travel, wine, entrepreneurship, hotels, restaurants, and much more, to really show what is possible for each and every one of us in this wonderful industry. To make sure follow Raizup and Savvy Hotelier to not miss these events and to catch up on the previous ones as well. We go live on LinkedIn on Thursdays. Today's event is about human resources, and the human resources function across every part of the hospitality industry. And with me today, I have three fantastic panelists to help us discover what careers are possible in this sector and this niche of the hospitality industry. We'll share with you real-life practical examples of the many different jobs and areas you can pursue within human resources, but also give you general career advice and guidance on what to do next if you're feeling stuck. And I'm sure you will feel inspired by these panelists and their stories. They all have gone through very interesting career pivots and changes, and not just only recently, but of course throughout their lives. So anytime during this discussion, pop your questions in the channel, in the comments of section of whatever you are, whether it's YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn. We will make sure to address these questions throughout the conversation. It's not just at the end, because we want you to get the most out of this conversation. So let's get started. Let's meet the panel first. First up, we have Phil Street. He started his hospitality career in a cruise ship, and he now runs his own recruitment agency in hospitality. So there's a whole lot of story there that he's going to share with us shortly. But over the last year, he's also started a podcast, a Hospitality Meets podcast, where he talks to people in the industry to share their stories and to hear what they have learned throughout their times. It's awesome to have you, Phil.
Thank you very much for having me. I think the sense of irony around the fact that we can't actually meet anybody at the moment, but nevertheless, the podcast has been a real revelation this last year.
Amazing. I have lots of questions for you, and I really enjoy a podcast. So it's always it's nice to have you here.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, next up, we've got Raquel Rubio. Her passion is to help people find their potential and to be the happiest and the best humans they can be, which she does through her own company, Art to Be Human. Raquel started her career in HR on property as a generalist, but has found her way through the sector through trial and error, like everybody else. So we're looking forward to hearing your story, Raquel.
Thank you very much for having me. It's really, really nice to be with all of you.
And lastly, we have Stefan Nemecek, Global Leadership Development Manager at IHG. That's what he does today. But he started his path in the hospitality through vocational education in Austria, and he built an incredible career in restaurants before shifted his path to coaching, learning, and development. So I'm sure we'll hear all about that. Thank you for being here, Stefan.
Thank you very much, Maria, and hello to everyone watching. Excited to be here.
Great. So I want to dive straight into your stories. Let's start with you, Stefan. How did you go from being a F&B manager to a learning consultant and leadership development manager? Can you tell us your story from starting out in the industry as a trainee, working your way up in restaurants, and then shifting to coaching and learning?
Absolutely happy to do so. If you only allow me to go a few steps back from that F&B manager role. So I come originally from Austria, and I kind of really was brought up in that Sound of Music scenery, really like you see it in the movie. So I had my first job, you could say, when I was 10 years old, and I was working at the lake and helping sailors to set up their sailing boats, and those that were not that confident to sail on their own to join them and just go on little cruises on the local lake. So at a very young age, I actually knew, well, whatever I'm going to do in the future, it has to do something with people. So then it was just a very small step to go like, oh, okay, hospitality is where I want to go. And then I attended vocational training back in Austria and had internships all over Europe with different companies. And I actually then proceeded to the area of food and beverage, and I worked up my ranks, and I took that classic approach of like, let's just slowly move up the career ladder, and sometimes probably faster than I would have expected, but just moving up. And with, I guess, the final aim being like, one day you're going to be general manager. And then was that one moment when I was working in the Middle East, in Kuwait for 3 years, where I go like, yes, I really love what I'm doing. I'm just not unsure that I'm maybe living in a world that's a little bit too small, mentally, not geographically, because I've never seen any other industries. I've never been exposed to what else is out there. And so I decided to do a part-time MBA in the UK. And through that, obviously, I got in touch with a lot of people, and I also got exposed to a lot of different disciplines, one of them actually being coaching. And there were various assessments, and, on some of them I did poorly, and on some of that I did better, and one of them being coaching. And I went like, oh, actually, now it's getting a little bit clearer. And I remember I was traveling back and forth from Kuwait to the UK every 6 weeks, being on planes. And there was always one book with me. And that was, and it's behind me, those are my 15 most formative books. It was Viktor Frankl's Man's in Search for Meaning. And that's the first time I got like, oh, okay, there's more than just this, up the ladder. There's this finding your real purpose. And the moment I was like, exposed to the other people and that coaching element, I was like, that's the purpose. And I thought back to, what were the things I really enjoyed in all the jobs I've done previously. And it was always this element of inspiring others to really see and reach their fullest potential. Back to when I was 10 and I helped those sailors that didn't have the confidence to go like, hey, you can do that. I'll be with you. But by the end of the day, you'll be comfortable cruising around the lake. And that's where things shifted. And I was not interested anymore. Let's continue climbing up the ladder. It's more about, okay, and how can I now truly live that purpose? And hence I stepped out of operations. I moved into coaching and consulting, and I stepped also out of hospitality. However, it was never the driver of like, I need to get out of hospitality. It was just about, I want to see a little bit more. And if there are other industries, let's see what I like. Didn't take too long, only 3 years, for my love kind of coming back to hospitality, as IHG Hotels and Resorts then contacted and said, like, we've got the best of two worlds for you. We've got training and we've got hotels. Are you interested? And that probably was one of the fastest decisions I've ever made in my life.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. That's really interesting to hear that whole journey of thought process and discovery. All right. Well, shall we move to Raquel? So you've studied hospitality, you graduated, you went on to work in hotels, but looking at your career path, you've always been in human resources in one way or another, from property to moving to corporate, and then obviously doing your own thing now. When you were graduating, what did you think you were going to do, and I guess how does it compare to where you are today?
Yes, it's a really good question. Well, I guess when if I was to place myself back when I was in that kind of 2021 and I was doing my studies, at that time I thought I was going to be a general manager. That's what I wanted to do in hospitality. And the reason is because I knew I wanted to lead people. I knew I was good at organizing things. I was good at caring for the development of others, but I always thought it was about being that general manager. And through my studies in hospitality management, I discovered that actually what I really loved doing was more that growing that human potential side of it. And so I moved from being this wannabe director or general manager to really focusing on HR. and human resources. So my first step was to complete my master's in human resources, and I was really wanting to do that to get to know the function. And then I spent, about 15 years learning all aspects of the function and working in different roles. And I was very clear that I wanted to stay in hospitality because that's the industry that I love. And I didn't want to work in human resources in other industries. So I stick to it, despite some of the advice that I was getting from some of my mentors to say that I had to broaden my horizons and I had to go to other industries. But the industry was exciting enough, as we all know, to stay. And I really enjoy my career throughout.
Thank you for sharing that. It's really interesting that you stuck to it, even though people tell you otherwise. And that's I think there's something to discuss there in terms of really knowing what you want to do and just sticking to it. Right, then let's do a final introduction with Phil. Phil, you began your industry in a cruise ship operations. Even though your parents ran a hotel, you kind of went from land to sea, stuck around there for a bit. How did you turn to recruitment, and what about it that attracted you so much to even start your own business in this part of hospitality?
Yeah, well, I suppose unlike other people on the panel, I came late to the party with hospitality. I wasn't, as a kid, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do at all, and I actually ran away to sea to try and figure that out, and then discovered a career that I really fell in love with almost instantly, to be honest. And I think the key thing for me was that was the first time that I'd ever had an experience of climbing a ladder and then beginning to lead people and beginning to affect them and their performance and the way that they behave and all of these sorts of things, which I found really, really fascinating. Long story short, the transition then back onto land after 5.5 years with P&O Cruises, I struggled a little bit with the transition in terms of when you're on a cruise ship, everybody's there for kind of one purpose, and that's to work. You're lucky if you get some time off and you can go and see parts of the world and all of that. That's great, but actually I remember leading people and people coming up to work and they were kind of on their deathbed, and you had to say to them, look, you can't work today, go back to your cabin and rest up. Whereas when I came to London, I found the exact opposite in mentality. People were almost they were trying to find an excuse not to come to work. But I was too young back then to really try and, I suppose, truly figure out that I could have impacted that in a lot better way. And that's actually when recruitment kind of called to me. And being on a cruise ship is almost like being on the moon. You're completely disconnected from the world. You don't know what's going on out there. You don't know what's going on in the news, apart from this daily newsletter that you get with very limited headlines. And this was in the days before mobile phones, by the way. And then I was amazed when I came to London and I was looking for a job that somebody could actually give me there was somebody who would present opportunities to me that weren't in just the companies themselves. I didn't even know that existed. And so one of the things that I've always loved doing is talking. I love talking to people. And I just kind of, that opened my eyes to something that I didn't even know was there. And I took the plunge some 17 years ago in that. Have had ups and downs in that. This is the second economic crisis that I've experienced as a recruiter. This is the first one as a business owner. And actually the reason I wanted to start my own business, this is 10 years into my recruitment life. My business has just gone through 6 years of life. I wasn't convinced that the way that things were being done by other companies was the right way. There's a lot of talk in recruitment about it being a sales job. And I just believe, there's a human being at the heart of everything that we do. And I think if you look at them as a sales transaction, then you're not respecting the human being. And I had a real problem with that in a few different companies. So starting my own company meant that I could take control of the values of that and place that human being element as the kind of the heart and soul of why we do everything. And I can't tell you, I mean, I've 17 years is a long time to be doing anything. I still get such a fantastic buzz when you marry up a company and you marry up a human being and it works and everybody's happy, and that's when sparks fly, and that's when really great things happen. And that is why I do what I do.
Definitely hospitality at the center of everything, right? It's all about connecting with people. And yeah, super interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Very interesting story, and also self-discovery, because you don't know what you don't know. You sometimes come across things, and then step by step you figure things out, and like, okay, maybe a little bit more of that, maybe a little bit more of that. And then you, if you like it, you stick to it. If you don't like it, you find something else.
Exactly.
Great. Well, I think we already had some questions from the audience, so maybe shall we take a couple of those? So there's a great one from Rita. What are organizations looking for when it comes to talent? That's a very broad question, obviously. Is there anything that's changed, in your opinion, in the last year?
No.
No. Okay. Right. Next question.
for me, I mean, obviously, the higher up the ranks you go, the potential for the role to become more technically focused is there. But for me, attitude dominates everything. If your attitude is not in the right place, then that comes across in the quality of the work that you do at any level. That's entry up to board. So for me, as a recruiter, I'm still always looking for the attitude to underpin the skill set.
I would agree. I think for me personally, what I've noticed is that more and more, it's more important to be adaptable. And what we often talk about, this learning agility and this ability to adapt and be flexible. The last year events have really shown us that we all need to be ready for whatever can happen. And I love, I love talking about how creative people get when there's barriers and there's circumstances that make us having to adapt. So I would say if you're someone who can show that you can adapt and that you are creative in your thinking and the way that you approach challenges, then that is something that is going to be definitely a skill that a lot of businesses will really value.
Yeah, I think a lot of people get bogged down in job descriptions, and that's a guideline only, really. I mean, at the end of the day, I think if you're passionate about something, then actually getting involved in anything that business or that moment needs should kind of come naturally.
Yeah, well, I guess there's a bit of challenge for the people who see those job descriptions. They're like, oh, I don't have 10 out of 10 of these skills. I don't know, I'm not going to apply for this role. Or I don't even have 8 out of 10 of these skills. I'm not going to apply for this role. And then, of course, conveying that passion in the resume, in the cover letter, whatever is sort of required is, I guess, a big hurdle for well, there's a great comment as well from Kat here in terms of overcoming that and conveying yourself and figuring out what you are. Stefan, do you have any comments? How do you help people kind of figure out what they want to do and how to kind of present themselves in the best light?
Sorry, I'm kind of connecting the question before with your question right now. And I think one thing that now we're looking for, I think more than ever, is, and some of you might have come across this, Stephen R. Covey's very famous circle of influence versus circle of concern, where circle of concern people that operate predominantly in this. The world should give me, the government should do this, my boss should do this, my colleagues should do this. So it's all the worries, all the things that you blame other people for. That's where many of us operate because it's so easy. It's quite easy to blame someone. Where we actually should be operating is that circle of influence, where we understand, okay, there's not a lot that I can control. It's my mindset and my actions. At the same time, there is a lot I can influence. And I think that links nicely to the piece that Raquel just shared in terms of being creative, being curious, understanding that you're sitting in that driver's seat. And I think that is that attitude that Phil talked about in terms of, do you have that curiosity? Do you have that level where you want to go? on that second page where you go like, that job description, that's just overwhelming. I've just recently seen a very nice job advertisement, if you want to call it that, where someone says like, even if you don't meet any of these criteria or not most of these criteria, don't worry, just apply. And then we'll take it from there, I think. And that's a nice mindset to have. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? You apply for your dream job and you go like, I really want that job. The worst they can do is say, no, we're not going to invite you, right? So just give it a shot. My former boss had this lovely saying of, you will miss all the shots you never take, right? Yeah. So just go for it.
I've got a story from my own life, actually, in a similar sort of vein. When I started at P&O, I was 21 years old, and everybody that I spoke to told me you'll never get a job on a cruise ship at the age of 21. And to me, it was the dream job because somebody would pay me to travel. Basically, that's effectively what I had in my head. And that then gets reflected in how you kind of act at interview. And I remember doing this group interview they had 10 people who were all looking for the same job. And they asked us all questions just about yourself. Tell us your story. What have you achieved so far? And it was going around the table, and there was all these people with 10 years experience of working BA, 12 years experience in a luxury customer service environment. And here was me, who just basically had to say, I'm here because I've got a little bit of experience, but actually this is my dream job. I really, really want to be here. And that's perhaps not the way that I said it at interview, but that's ultimately what got me the job. And that came back to me later on when I was speaking to the people who actually hired me as to why did you pick me? And they saw the opportunity for somebody who really wanted to be there, who they could mold and and send them down a good path, as opposed to picking up somebody who's got 10 years of bad habits.
Absolutely. And I think to add to that, it's so much easier to build capability around the skills of individuals. Anything can be learned. But motivation is a really tougher place to be if organizations need to work on that. So yeah, when you see someone who has that passion and someone who has that desire, you know that they're going to give that 110% to really, really strive to learn whatever they need to learn. And a lot of these jobs sometimes is about really caring. And we are in the service industry, right? So it's all about really caring for other people and being able to just invest in that effort that it takes to really make someone else's day really special. So you want that passion and you want that. And someone was asking about how do you do that in a CV? I guess is thinking about what you're passionate about. What are you passionate about? What do you care about? And how can you link what you care about into your CV? So it could be that it's charity. It could be that it's groups that you take care of. It could be that it's events that you've organized in the past. And a lot of young people come to me sometimes like, I don't have this experience. And I'm like, actually, you do, through university or through your MVQs or your social networks. You've been doing all these initiatives. You really need to showcase that in your CV. So it's not just about work experience.
Yeah, I think that sums up quite well. I hear a lot of be curious, be proactive. If you want something, go for it, be passionate, show that passion. Don't be afraid to show that passion. But Stefan, do you have anything to add here in terms of, motivational advice or kind of helping someone find that passion? Because I guess it's easy once you know what you want, but sometimes you just sit there like, I don't know, I have so many things I could do right now. I'm interested in a little bit of everything. Where do I even start?
I love that. Brilliant. As before, I'm sorry, I'm taking one step back to take two steps forward, right? We talk about your CV and we think about this is this one document I've sitting somewhere on my hard drive and I'll send it across all companies with all applications. Think about how much would it make a difference if you tailor your CV to the job you're applying for. And there's one thing, if you're applying to 200 companies, that tells me like you just want a job, but you're not after something very particular. But if you're applying just to 10 or 15 companies, you definitely can invest the time to go like, hey, I can really shape that CV so that my passion shines through, and there is some resonance, as someone said in the comment, of that recruiter or that person making the decisions of will you get invited to an interview or not. That really tells them like, oh, someone really took the time to go like, what is our company about? And the CV really 100% matches what we are looking for. That's that one piece. Second one, to go to Maria's question in terms of how do you find your passion? 2 questions I've heard actually from Simon Sinek, and that is advice that I keep sharing with people. One is think about your childhood, and I mean, from the age of where you remember things until your early teens, and think about the best childhood moment you ever had. And the first thing that comes to mind, go like, what does that tell you about yourself? What does that tell you that you love? What does that tell you that you're passionate about? And that really can act like a torpedo of, okay, this is what I want to pursue. Second piece, if you already have work experience, think through all your work experience and pick one moment where you go, in all the work experience I've had so far, there is this one moment that if I could, that what I just did there for the rest of my life until I move into retirement, that's what I would love to do. That gives you a very strong signal on what you're passionate about. And yes, not every day will be like 8, 10, 12 hours full of that moment. But if you go like, the trajectory is there and this is what I want to have, that is a very, very strong guide again on finding your passion. And of course, you can go very structured through that, right? Another formative book here is actually from Simon Sinek, Find Your Why, where it tells you, well, we all know how important it is to find our passion and live our passion. The critical thing, back to your question, Maria, is how do I find it? And that is a really good guidebook in how do I find it if I'm lost and I don't know where to even start.
I guess one thing to add is that your passion doesn't always need to be the thing that makes you money as well. It can be, but if you're happy with your job, but it may not be the most thing you're most excited about, does it mean that you can't go do other things in your free time to balance that out? That's just also one thing. Sometimes those are 2 different things, and it's okay. And maybe you have 3 or 4 different things that are going on. They I'm sure complement each other in some way. So definitely, thank you. That's a really great advice. And I haven't read that book of Simon Sinek, but I've heard a lot about it.
It's a belter. It's a belter.
Yeah, it's a good book. It's a good book.
Yeah, I think it's a good place to start. Yeah. Let's take a step to another direction here. I want to kind of talk a little bit about jobs and opportunities within the HR function, really what kind of roles there are, what kind of things you could be doing. Maybe if we can kick off with Raquel, you started on property with different sort of generalist role of an HR. There is obviously the recruiter, the admin, the trainer, and lots of other things sort of that are going on property. What can one do there at a hotel, and what can they go next? So what are the steps they can go afterwards?
Sure. So I think I'm going to use my personal experience because that may help. I'm not saying that this is what it has to be true for everybody. But in my experience, I started my career in HR as a coordinator, HR coordinator in a hotel. So normally in a hotel, depending on how big it is, you may have the HR manager or the HR director, depending on the structure. You may have like a number 2, and then you may have a team of people supporting. If they're very lucky, they'll have a trainer, they'll have someone exclusively doing training and development, and then you may have also someone in recruitment hiring as well. So you typically have a couple of people that maybe specialize and what we call them generally. So I started as a coordinator, so a lot of the role involving supporting everybody else. So I would be doing a bit of interviewing, I was doing assisting the training manager as well, depending on what he had to be done. And so again, the good thing about the generalist role is that it gives you the opportunity to understand what do you like. And for me, I did a bit of recruitment, I did a bit of training, and I was able to do employment relations, for example. And so from doing that, I was able to say, okay, what do I like? What is it that, back to that passion point. And so you could then specialize and say, well, I want to go into recruitment path, or I want to go into training, or I want to be staying in this idea of becoming a generalist. And so that's what I chose to do. I was like, look, I want to learn everything about HR, and my way up probably is to be staying in that generalist role. So I did HR manager eventually in a hotel property, and then I was very lucky to be appointed as the area HR manager for a bunch of hotels in London. And so therefore you got that experience as well, is not only looking one property, but start looking into what is it like to be in different properties. And it brings different challenges when you don't have the time to be exclusively with one team, but you need to make sure that you prioritize supporting a few properties. So that was really good fun. And for me, then it was about, okay, do I want to specialize? Do I want to stay generalist? So again, there was always this, do I do this? Do I do that? And eventually what I did was I moved to corporate. That's another role that you can do in a generalist role. And I looked after several properties in Europe. So then again, that was not about London. It was about, Europe, which again, the scope of the international setting and the legislation as a HR professional is completely different. And again, it seems like the same job, but it's not. It's so different in how you support then hotels from a corporate perspective to really get the job done for their people. And so
Yeah.
that was the generic path. And then I couldn't help myself. I had to go and specialize in leadership development because my passion all along had been developing people and coaching people. And after doing my coaching certification, that's where I specialized. But that was true for me. A lot of my colleagues stayed in the generic sort of generalist role. And for me, I chose to specialize, and that's when I continue my career in human resources, but then within the leadership development space, similar to Stefan. And then I did diversity and inclusion as well. So you start then looking into, wow, there's a wide range of opportunities here as a professional in deep diving into different expertise. And so depending on, some of my colleagues like more the employee relations track. And that's something that you can do as well if you want to. So it's very, very diverse. This is the thing. When people think about HR in hospitality, they probably don't imagine that there's this wide range of possibilities. So I really enjoyed putting myself in different situations to learn about the different roles that I could tap into.
I think it's like you said, there's, even if you specialize within that, there's different branches of things. You can go ultra specialized in a topic like diversity and inclusion or employee relations and things. And Stefan, I think you had similar kind of progression within IHG as well. You had different learning and development roles looking after different regions. What kind of, I guess, how were they different? What do I know if I want to do leadership development or training on property or a different kind of training role? Is there anything to think about, or just any advice, I suppose?
Yeah, when Raquel was talking, there was a lot of nodding going on. I started in a Europe-wide role. Now I'm in a global role. And even though from the outside, you might say like, yeah, it's pretty much the same job, just for a bigger geography. Whew, no, it's definitely not. So there's a big change. And in learning, as you said, you could even then specialize further down. You could be a facilitator / trainer. That means you train people. You could act more as a learning consultant to find the right opportunities for people to learn. You could become a designer, and that again has two fields. You could be the person creating content, and you could be the person making it look nice, right? In terms of the classic design thinking, you'd become a curator of content where you don't create yourself, but you make sure you connect the right topics all together. So there's a wide field in learning again. And I've started off in brands and operations training. Now I moved to leadership development, now global leadership development. So of course, within learning in the hospitality area, there's a whole different, there are different areas where you can actually be and how you train people.
Yeah. Phil, do you recruit for HR roles, or do you kind of specialize in another area?
No, we've done HR as well. Obviously, my own experience is purely within the recruitment field in terms of what I deliver personally. But I think Raquel and Stefan have kind of eloquently put the diversity of roles that are available within HR is actually phenomenal. and it's not just. There's so many different elements to HR as well, and don't forget as well that even in operations, if you're an operator, you have to have a little bit of HR knowledge to understand that one, if you're on point with the company's values and culture, and that's how that's translated through into the human beings, or even just in terms of having to deal with the everyday things that come up through that means. It's not all at the feet of the HR department to do that. And I think the best organizations that I see have this wonderful communication flow between all departments. They're all there to help and support each other, and help in those moments where the knowledge runs out in one person. So you go to somebody else who's got the knowledge, and that can come from any part of the business. It's not just purely about the HR team.
Yeah, definitely not siloed, right? Working together, that is always the dream. In terms of qualifications for a kind of roles in HR, I know there is a CIPD Chartered Institute for this in the UK. I'm sure across the world in different countries in Europe, globally, there's different kinds of requirements. Of course, not looking at the legal side of HR, which is completely different everywhere you go, but is there something that one should consider, or does one kind of just start and then figure out if they should do qualifications like that? Because obviously they take time, they take money, there's effort. Are they required, or when are they required, essentially?
I think you've definitely got to start first, I think, and see if it's something that it really sings to you, before you then start reinvesting in yourself to get yourself. I would suggest that entry level, you don't need to start with a qualification, and our two panelists can agree or disagree on that point freely. But then at some point you've got, if it is that thing that is singing to you that this is the career path for me, then yes, absolutely, back up with a qualification as quickly as you can. Because then you take that out of the conversation at some point, and especially in a recruitment process, if we're looking for an HR director and we have somebody who is fully chartered and we have somebody who's on the way or has not started, then the likelihood is that the organization are going to side with the safe option. Might not be the right option, but that's a little bit of basic psychology at play in the recruitment process. So just take that off the table as part of the conversation, and get yourself qualified as quickly as you can once you've identified that, yes, this is the path for me.
And of course, there's so many qualifications. Like there's obviously CIPD, which is more of a legal side, making sure you understand how to handle people from that sort of side of things. But if you want to be a coach or a trainer, there's a very different kind of qualification, right? So it's identifying that, like you said, and picking one, just starting somewhere. Maybe you can do start. I'm sure there's levels to it, but like a starter level, and then see if that's something you want to carry on with, and pursue that further, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think there are many, many, many companies who will support that as well. If you have shown a propensity for something within that realm, and you go, yeah, that's what I really want to do, then they'll send you off on a 2-day taster course or something like that. It gives you that extra flavor of that particular discipline.
And I think from a motivation perspective, once you know that you really want to do something, you're going to want to study. So I would encourage people to think about, what else do I want to learn? Because if you're only focusing on doing a qualification because you feel that you have more chances to do a job, that's not going to be very motivating for you to then study when it gets really tough and you have to work hard to get your qualification. But if you, as Phil was saying, if you're really clear on your passion, it will become naturally that you will want to start building on that journey of learning as much as you can. And there'll never be enough. You'll want to do course after course, and you'll go into one thing and another. And a lot of great employers out there, they'll support that journey if resources is a challenge, because they know that they can invest in you, because you are going to give back all that knowledge into the organization. So it's about starting with that clarity, which I know is where a lot of people struggle at the start, but it's having no pressure that whatever you make the decision today, it will evolve. Like some of my qualifications, I didn't know that I was going to use them in a certain way. At that time, I did it because I was curious. I went for it, and then that opened up all the possibilities. So yeah, looking at it from that perspective.
Yeah. It's not just your professional; it's also personal development, isn't it? If that's what you want to do, I mean, the least you can do is read a book and watch a little bit of. I mean, there's a lot of on YouTube you can watch that kind of summarizes lots of stuff and get that familiarity with the topic that you're interested in.
Yeah.
Okay, so then looking again at sort of for someone who is interested in HR, let's take for example someone who is a fresh graduate or about to graduate. I think there's a bit of graduation going on right now in the hospitality world in terms of different schools. Do you recommend that someone goes to get some operational experience in a hotel, restaurant, or any sort of function before they consider moving to human resources, or should they, even if they know that they're interested in it, should they go straight for human resources as an intern and kind of work their way up there? Anyone? Raquel?
I'm happy to go for it. I have to say, for me personally, it was very useful to have operational experience. At the end of the day, your role in a human resources department is really a role of serving your people. So when you have to look after this group of people, it's really great that you understand them. Now, do you need operational experience to be a good HR professional? Probably is not as a requirement, but when you go into your environment, you're going to want to learn your environment. So you could do it at the same time. If you have the opportunity to go straight into a HR role, do it. Like, don't waste time if you know already that's your passion. But I think it's important that you keep thinking while you're in that job, how do I get to know what my people go through every day? And so if you don't have that background, my background was in F&B, for example, and I was able to connect to food and beverage colleagues much, much quicker always because I had that background. But it's about how do you get to know your environment? How do you get to know your people? Because if you are recruiting for them, training them, looking after them, managing their development, helping and supporting, you're going to want to know who are you dealing with. So you can do it first as a build-up because that opportunity in HR is not coming up. Or if you do have an opportunity, go for it and then keep that in mind. Because a lot of my colleagues who, for example, came from other industries, that became a gap and that became an issue in the long term. That became a barrier. So I feel that be curious about the industry. Even though you are in HR, get to know what sales does, what operations does, what other functions do, because that is going to be really important for you to be very good at your job in supporting them.
It's like Phil said in the beginning, it's not a sales transaction. And it's a personal relationship with these individuals, whether it's a person, company, or person to person. It's not just about putting someone in a role and kind of be done with it. It's making sure it's all correct and supporting these people in a human way, personable way.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of black and white elements to business, but when you're dealing with humans dealing grey every day. So, there's so many moving parts to it. I think the greater understanding you have of those grey areas of business, which come from, knowledge of operations, knowledge of sales, all of these things, they will help you do the black and white stuff much better.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that was brilliant. I think it's a really, really valuable piece of advice as well, especially for our industry, where it's so operational. It's so important to understand how the business works on a day-to-day basis. Let's take another pivot. We have a few questions from the audience around social media profiles, having a portfolio, websites, experiences, and projects, because having a resume is, everyone has a resume. Cover letter, most people have a cover letter, which obviously needs to be tailored as well for the job. How important are these social media profiles? How important is it to have a personal brand? And maybe even a website or share other things that you do. I mean, all three of you do that. At one, maybe start with Stefan. Do you have any advice or comments and things like that for someone who's starting out? Should they have this, or is it not that important, do you think?
Really good question. I think there's the potential of you falling victim of one of the biggest mistake in branding, and that's focusing too much about your logo or your website or your representation, right? The same when we talked about learning or development, it's not only about reading a book or watching a YouTube video. Still, and many of you will be familiar with how people learn, and there's the classic 70-20-10 model. 70% of how we learn is through practice. So rather than spending 6 hours on what does that logo look like for my website, think about from who can I learn, who can I connect with, who can expose me to the right people. And with that being said, I'm not suggesting don't have a website, don't have a social media presence, absolutely have these things. Just understand that you might be doing things that are probably more valuable for your development than focusing too much on your internet presence.
Anything to add?
I think the social media presence is now part of life, right? I mean, so from a very, very logical perspective, if you're putting yourself out there to be seen, then you have to start with the end in mind, kind of thing. So if you are looking for a job and that job is in a particular element, then make sure that your social media is giving you the best chance for you to do that. Follow things on Twitter and comment on things on Twitter or whatever that put you in the light of the thing that you want to achieve. And don't underestimate its power. I mean, I don't personally go onto somebody's Facebook profile to see, do people still use Facebook, by the way? Am I just an old man now? I don't go on to see what they're posting on Facebook, but I do know that companies now do that, as part of their recruitment process. We want to make sure that we're not bringing somebody in who's just constantly displaying photographs of them being drunk at 2 o'clock in the morning and in a bar in London, although we'd probably all like to do that right now. But yeah, so I would just cover all the bases. That's just about getting the basics right. Make sure that what you want people to see, what people are looking to see, is what you're actually portraying.
Yeah, make sure that it's relevant for sure. So it's like your LinkedIn profile is not your resume, because you may be applying for different types of jobs with your resume. So you have different types of resumes, but LinkedIn is just one page about you, what it is that you are very good at. That needs to definitely portray all of those things, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that point from Phil. I think it's important that you bear in mind that they're hiring you as a whole human being, and so yeah, employers will be able to reach out and take a look at what's out there. So be mindful and a bit conscious about what is out there about you, and if, as we've saying here, like if that's what you want to portray, go ahead, but just be mindful that there is no such a thing nowadays where everything is private, because social media is accessible to everybody. So yeah, be aware of what people can see and make sure that you're okay with that.
Yeah, anything from the past can still come up and find you. So maybe Google yourself.
Well, there is such a thing. I mean, we are seeing this more and more and more with a lot of the news that are happening, about different situations in the world where mistakes that were made before, they're now being brought up to people's attention. So it's important that we keep that in mind. And just be mindful. Just be mindful.
Be respectful with everything you put out there, essentially, right? If you have an issue with your employer, maybe don't post about it.
It's your choice. It's your choice. The thing is, I think we're not here probably to tell people what to do. We just saying, just be mindful and make choices that you're like, okay, am I okay with doing this? Because nowadays, if I Google anybody's name, I can find lots of stuff. So it's always very entertaining.
Right. Well, we've covered lots of different topics, and we are closing in on the hour. if there's any last minute questions, please pop them in the comments as well from the audience. But I want to wrap up with a bit of, I guess, a bit of a personal touch from each of you. Phil, do you want to kind of maybe, if you take 60 seconds to talk about your podcast? Like, you've spoken to over 60 people in a span of a year, which is more than one a week at this point. What have you learned? So maybe if you can summarize all of these 65 people you've spoken with into like a 1 minute learning.
Yeah.
Is that possible?
Good luck, Phil. I think the podcast probably is just a really great representation of all of the different things that are possible in this industry. And the one big learning for me, and I think I probably knew this anyway, is there's no right or wrong path to get to where you want to go. There's so many different ways that you can get there. I really loved actually what Stefan said in his piece about the fact that, you know, he was on a climb of the ladder and then found the bit while he was up the ladder and then moved sideways off into something else. That's one way of doing it. And the other thing is that we put leaders up on a pedestal in this industry, and well, in any industry actually, but actually leaders I think are just people who are comfortable making mistakes and know how to move on quickly, and take ownership of these mistakes and just get past it and don't dwell on it. You know, we're human beings, none of us are perfect, we're all going to make mistakes, so just the sooner you can get comfortable with that, the better.
Yeah.
As long as you're learning from that mistake, probably should add that.
Yeah, I think that's the point of mistakes, hopefully, for all of us. Stefan, what's the story behind the logo, the Lego piece?
Well, there are numerous stories. One is I'm absolutely curious in everything I do. There's another formative book that is, the title is The Power of Thinking Like a Toddler, and there's so many parallels in terms of like, if you look at how a toddler networks and how difficult it is for adults, it is mind-blowing to go like, well, if I could just go back to networking like a toddler and talk to any stranger on the street and go like, hey, my name is Stefan, how are you doing? Like putting that into the adult life, it was just eye-opening. So curiosity is something that drives me. This must have been one of the first toys I played with Lego overall, and it has always been with me. It's one of the tools I use. So Lego Serious Play is a learning method which really connects the hands with your brain, where the underlying principle is that actually you already know all the answers. It's just about bringing them out from your subconscious, and that method just helps with that. And the third story, why this is here, it's a really good, as you just saw now, conversation starter, and it can take us to many, many different paths.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love Lego, so yeah, that would be great. I'd love to have one of them. Great. Well, and Raquel as well. Just a little bit of a personal story about your experience in human resources. I don't have a specific question. Just maybe one like your most memorable experiences, like that.
Yeah, I just want to finish probably off with just maybe telling you a bit more about this art to be human, because I think I haven't today, and I really want to express everybody that when you think about your life and you think about your approach to your career, think about it like this constant learning experience. And for me, I feel that being a human being is a bit of an art. And like Phil was saying, you make mistakes, you go one direction, then you change it. And I feel that if we remove that pressure of where is it that I'm going versus what is it that I'm doing right now that I want to enjoy and make the most of it, if we focus on that, then the dots will then build up one after the other. And then you'll look back and you're like, wow, that was a really exciting career path. But sometimes we're so worried about where do we need to be by when and the future that we just not enjoy the moment. So I just want to say that today, that just be in the moment, focus to that passion, just decide on doing something, make the most of it. And then if you don't like it, you switch and you do something else. And that is probably one of the joys of life, and we need to go back to that. And I think it's been a tough few months for everybody, and I think we we all need a bit of joy back into enjoying the moment and just letting the future to come to us rather than just being hunting for it so much.
Yeah.
Can,
I guess that.
Can I add to that? Actually, I think we're all get pigeonholed by your job titles, but actually reinvention is a natural part of life, and we don't actually give ourselves enough credit as human beings. We are the most adaptable species on the planet. So in a moment whereby you have the rug pulled from under you, which is probably going to happen at some point in your life, then it's not to say that to be ready for it, but just be aware of the fact that you have the capability within you to move and change. And despite what others may tell you, that's actually one of the most powerful pieces of advice that I could ever give anyone, is that just, reinvention is going to be part of your life.
Right.
I think.
I was like, okay, mic drop. Indeed. I'm sure. I mean, last year has clearly shown that lots of people have had to do that, and I'm sure there's going to be more of chances, opportunities, if you want to look at it in a positive way, to do that, to discover a new side of yourself and figure out how you can apply yourself in a different way. Hospitality is not just within that hotel building, that restaurant building, or whatever it is. It's everywhere, and it can be in another building of a corporate office, of a non-hospitality business, because they also have employees that need to be looked after in a way. They always look after hospitality graduates. At least now they are, because they realize there's a group of people who have a specific skill set, a very unique skill set that you cannot necessarily teach. You can refine it, you can improve it, but you cannot take someone who doesn't have any hospitality inside of them and teach them hospitality. And that is something I've seen a lot recently as well. And kind of last question, I suppose, kind of add to this whole conversation. If there was one piece of advice, and maybe we start with Stefan, is to someone who is a student graduate today, what kind of advice would you give them?
Thank you. This is kind of fresh on my mind because yesterday I received an amazing email that just confirms so much that I live my passion at my purpose. Is one of my colleagues at ISG Hotels and Resorts that reached out, and she's working a whole different function than I am. Said, she's been training with me for the past couple of years, and she's always trying to find her passion, and she started other training programs, but then she just found out, well, she just did it for someone else, or as we talked earlier, for a degree on a CV rather than really following her passion. And she just said, now she really found that when engaging in learning in terms of training other people, how did you word it? She's feeding something in herself that has been starving for a very long time. And I love that, a very nice metaphor. And her question was then, so, okay, Stefan, now I understand I also want to be kind of in the training world and in the learning world. How do I get started? And I just looked around again, 15 most formative books. And
we need that list, Stefan. We need the list of the books.
Definitely need that list.
Gary Keller's The One Thing. And Gary Keller in that book talks about domino bricks, the ones you sometimes see on YouTube or videos where they line up domino bricks and you hit one and all of them fall. And we all know that. Now, what Gary says is the power of one domino brick actually has the power to push over the next brick, even if it is 1.5 times bigger than itself. So that means that second brick again can push over the next one, even if it is 1.5 times bigger than itself. And that scales extremely quickly. You just need 18 bricks, and you already have that size of the Leaning Tower in Pisa. You had another 5 year at the Eiffel Tower. You had another 10 year at the Mount Everest. And if you line up 57 bricks just in that fashion, that brick number 57 will have the size of the distance between the Earth and the Moon. And we just started with a normal sized domino brick. And I think you can use that principle, and that's what I want to, that piece of advice I want to share, in two ways. One is to really define what is my brick number 57 in terms of what is that huge end goal, and then to break it down. So if your goal is to, hey, in 5 years, I want to be in corporate HR and I want to be, in charge of recruitment. Go like, okay, that's what you want to do in 10 years. What does that mean? Where do you want to be in 5 years, in 3 years, in 2 years, in 1 year, in half a year, in 3 months, in 1 month, this week, today, now, right? And then you can use that domino principle the other way around. And you could go like, okay, now it's about, I've got my big 57, but now I need to define the first one. And you go like, okay, what is the one thing, that one domino brick that I can do right now that by doing such will make everything else easier or even unnecessary? And then you move away from that whole thinking of, and I don't know what to do, and imposter syndrome, and should I get a certificate and all that, into action. And it takes you somewhere, right? Where there's progress, there is energy, and there will be impact. So don't think about what is the right thing to do. As Raquel said, just be curious, let the world open up to you, but start somewhere, start doing somewhere. Every little action is better than doing nothing.
Yeah.
That's from me.
Raquel, Phil?
I will support that because Stefan has beautifully described that. And so I would echo those words. And I guess that for me, I always ask people to ask themselves, what can I do today to learn something that I'm really excited about? Like, what can I do? Just what do I want to learn? How can I better myself? But from that perspective of learning, rather than, again, that pressure and anxiety of, I need to be there. And how can I get there? How can I get there? Just don't think about that. It's like, what can I learn today? What do I want to learn today? What am I excited about learning today? And just connect to that, and then everything else, as Stefan said, just will happen, and your milestones will definitely be taking you further. But just enjoy the ride, because then you look back, like, a few of us looking back and thinking, did I really enjoy myself to the most? Yes, I did. And that's what is exciting about, because life happens anyway, so you better enjoy it.
All right. Well, any last words, Phil? You already did a brilliant mic drop speech, so maybe
how would you add
I
to
don't know
that?
if you can top that one.
I now have a 57-point plan as to how my next business plan's getting written. No, I thought absolutely brilliant. I would just say, I'd come back to the point that I made all the way back at the beginning about attitude. Be mindful of your attitude. Be a sponge. Be inquisitive. Curious is the word that's been used. The piece of advice I was given when I started out in my career, when you're starting anywhere new, is just keep your eyes and your ears open and your mouth shut until such time that you feel like you are part of this team, or obviously open your mouth if you're asked to open your mouth, but take it all in and just understand where your place is. Every business has its own little nuances, and that's all controlled by human beings. And culture changes when one piece of that cog is taken out of the equation. So you're going to be put into positions where business is in a perpetual state of change. So just be a sponge.
Fantastic. Thank you so very much. We've overrun slightly. I'm very sorry, but this has been fantastic. So much advice, so much valuable advice, and really guidance for someone who's wherever they are in career, feeling lost or trying to figure out the next thing, or really know what they want to do but don't know how to get there. So it's been fantastic. Thank you all for volunteering your time, for sharing your insights, your stories, and really bringing some confidence to those in the industry who kind of a little bit lost right now, because naturally there's a lot going on. So thank you so very much once again, and thank you to our listeners and participants as well. Really appreciate your support and participation. So have a lovely rest of the day, afternoon, evening, whatever you are, and see you soon again.